Hey guys, this is Rich Klein from the Diamond Law Group. Today we're going to go over what happens after you close for your buyers and sellers. The first thing your buyers should do is put the utilities on in their name. It's a common question if they're not getting the keys at closing because the seller is holding on to the property afterwards, potentially because they themselves are also purchasing, so they can't possibly give the keys to the buyers at closing because they have yet to purchase their own new home, is when the utility should be put on in their name. And the answer is whenever you're getting the keys. Don't put the utilities, if you're the purchaser, in your name the day after you get the keys, because the utility companies may have been notified by the seller to turn them off as of that date, which they really shouldn't have. But in order to avoid any loss of continuity with the utilities, you should always put them on the day you are receiving the keys. You should also eventually, once you have your account number, sign up for auto pay, potentially also balance billing. If the utility company has the average of what the utilities should be on a monthly basis, you're probably also going to want to sign up for paperless billing. If your house is heated by oil and not gas, you have two options for that company. You can either sign up for some type of agreed upon amount, which is usually negotiable. If you're contacting one of the major oil companies on Long Island, typically Petro or Sloman's, they will also offer you money if the previous owner was also using the company. So be sure to ask if there's any incentives to stay with the existing company. Your alternative is if you're using a company, if for an assigned agreed upon amount, they also have a service contract you could purchase that the company will actually be responsible to fix the heating system if there's any issues. The alternative is you could also do a cash on delivery, and you could shop for the best company whenever your oil needs are there. Water is usually the biggest issue out of all of the utilities because it is the one utility that actually remains with the property. All of the other utilities are the seller's responsibility. It goes usually with their social security number, but water remains at the property. So oftentimes what will happen is the water companies cannot take the water out of the seller's name until the buyer puts it into their name, which may not have happened before closing or before possession. Then the buyer gets their first bill and they realize that there's usage from prior to their ownership or occupancy of the property. And then the buyer calls up their attorney upset that there's an outstanding bill. Luckily, in the contract, the standard boilerplate form, there is a provision that says if there's any issues post-closing with respect to the utilities, that the seller will still be responsible. Yes, you still have to chase them down in order to have them pay. However, there is protection within the contract, and hopefully they do the right thing. Sometimes the buyer's attorney will ask for money to be held in escrow for the water, which could be agreed upon as well. Thankfully, on Long Island, water is the cheapest of all of the utilities. If you're in the boroughs, water is more expensive, then you should definitely hold escrow. Next is putting your mortgage on auto pay if you're so inclined. What we suggest is using the new mortgage bank's website, that's called the Servicer, to enter your own checking account credentials. You don't want to have your checking account send out a check to your mortgage servicer for the following reasons. One, once the money is withdrawn from your account, you don't know if it's ever received. It's not like an old school check where you gave it to somebody at their wedding and they get back from their honeymoon and then they deposit the check. And then you see that it was actually deposited and it comes out of your account at that time. When you auto pay or sign up for bill payments, the money comes out of your account and you don't know if the check's ever received, you don't know if it's ever cashed. Second reason is it's quicker, right? Even if you have your checking account, send the mortgage servicer a check. It takes time for that to get there. So usually you sign up for the first of the month and then it has some time to get there. Third reason, most importantly, is if you sign up for paperless and auto pay and all these other things, you're not generally going to read the paperless. And if you keep having your checking account send the same amount on your anniversary date after 12 payments have been made, your payment will change because usually escrows change, and escrows change due to taxes. And if you keep having your checking account send out the wrong check to the mortgage servicer, and then the mortgage servicer tries to notify you of that fact that you have paperless statements and you're not reading them, as most people don't, then you may miss the fact that you're sending in the wrong amount. And the worst thing you could do is miss your mortgage payment, especially the first couple of months, because then the bank presumes that there was some type of fraud involved, and then they're going to pursue you accordingly. Next is when you sign up for AutoPay, make sure the first payment comes out correctly. You should never sign up for AutoPay at the actual closing itself. The bank may have a form for you. They may even require you to do so. Do not rely upon that. It is extremely unlikely that it will work correctly. So what you need to do is calendar after your closing the first payment to make sure it comes out of your account. If it's a Sunday or a federal holiday, make sure that it comes out the next business day. Something very often that we hear at closings from other attorneys, which we believe to be incorrect, is they say, if you make one extra payment per month, it'll speed up the amount of time for you to pay off your mortgage. That's an antiquated way of looking at a mortgage in terms of future value. What I mean by that is older people who have been accustomed to having a mortgage rate of 10, 11, 12, 15% interest. Yes, that is what they refer to as a bad debt. You're going to want to pay off that bad debt as soon as possible. But with interest rates in the 2, 3, 4, 5, even 6% range, you're not going to want to pay off your debt. And here's the reason why. We're going to go to this website, this mortgage calculator website, and I'm going to show you the following. The first thing is, it's important to note the theory behind the one extra payment is some people say to pay, let's say, on a weekly basis. Well, if you take 4 weeks, which is what we presume there is in a month, times 12 months, that only gives you 48 weeks. But as we know, there's 52 weeks per year. So that's where the extra one payment comes in if you pay on a weekly basis. So what we're going to presume here is that the average house on Long Island is $630,000. If you're putting down, let's say 20%, which we're going to presume is the average for now, but for our purposes, it leaves you with a loan amount of $504,000. Okay, we're going to say that rates are 5% and you're going to stay there for 30 years. That mortgage payment of $504,000 at 5% is $2,700 per month. The $2,700 per month, if you're making the one extra monthly payment, so $2,700 divided by 12 is $225 more per month. When you calculate that, it shows us here that if you take out a loan for 30 years at $504,000 at 5%, your payment again, like I said, is $2,700. You will have paid this total for the year, which again, in our previous continuing education classes, we went over such things as to why it's still a good time to buy. And even though this looks like a terrible number, it doesn't include the write-offs that you receive. But again, you could watch that other video. Right now, we're focusing on not prepaying. So if you make the extra payment of $225 per month, it shows you what you have paid, and the total savings is $85,000. And it shows you that you can save 4 years and 8 months, which sounds like a great deal. The problem is, again, going through all of this, you also lose the write-off if you do pay this sooner, okay? The problem with it is, if you don't stay in your home for 30 years and you sell any time before then, you're just giving the bank more money to make money. You're not reducing your mortgage payment. Most people think that if you make more payments towards your loan amount, that it will somehow reduce your payment on a monthly basis. It doesn't. That's something known as a recast. When your bank recasts your loan by making usually a large lump sum payment, then what they do at that time is take your the amount of principal that you still owe and divide it by how much time is left. That is the only way to reduce your actual payment per month. If you make additional payments without recasting your loan, and you'd have to ask your lending institution if they have that feature, preferably before you actually close on your transaction, if you're interested in participating in that potential loan function, is all you're doing is giving your bank more money. It serves you zero purpose other than saving that potential $85,000 and 4.5 years. You say, well, what's the alternative? The alternative is actually investing the money, okay? So if you took that same $2,700 per year at, let's just say, we'll change this to 5%, okay? So we'll show you on this website for compound interest. You have nothing in the bank right now. You're taking $2,700, the same payment you were going to make towards your mortgage payment, again for the same 30-year time frame, and we'll use the same interest rate, right? The same interest rate we had here for your extra payments. Instead of giving it to the bank, you're going to invest it, and then due to compound interest, the future value would be that you are making $188,000 instead of saving 85. So when you're talking about paying off your loan at these low interest rates, it's not worth it. And again, they say that the stock market returns 8% annually on average, which then brings us up to a much larger sum. So as you can see, usually the market will return 8%. We did it conservatively at 5%, and it was still in your best interest, pun intended, for you to invest the money over time. And again, yes, there could be capital gains on whatever it is that you have invested. However, if you're not fully investing in your IRAs, your personal IRAs for both you and potentially somebody else, depending on what the annual contribution limit is, or if you have other employer-sponsored benefits, you should definitely be maximizing those as well, especially if they have some type of matching investment program. All right, so do not repay your mortgage in advance. Next is the STAR exemption. You're going to want to, as a purchaser, file for your STAR exemption. It's only applies to you if it's your primary residence. Here's the website for you to do so. The deadline changed due to COVID. What I would suggest is applying as soon as possible before the taxes get assessed for the next calendar year. You will benefit from the seller's pre-existing STAR exemption, generally speaking, depending on the type of exemption that they have. And then when the next tax year comes out and is reassessed, you need to have your STAR exemption filed already. I would suggest when you file for the STAR exemption through the website, do not do so with a spotty internet connection from your phone. Do so from a landline computer. When you receive their printout confirmation, they say that they're going to email it to you. I've heard from previous clients many times that they never receive it. So what I would suggest is printing out that paper of confirmation from the STAR exemption and then putting it with all of your closing documents. You could also scan and email it to yourself or download the file, save it as a PDF, do something with it. Don't X out of it without at least saving that by cutting and pasting. Don't try to write down that number. We've also heard from clients that they wrote down a 0 when it was an O, or they wrote down a 1 and it was a lowercase l. And then what happens is you try to call New York State, which is a nightmare. And I've had clients actually have to drive to Albany to get this fixed. So the star exemption applies to your primary residence. It's roughly 10% of the school portion of your taxes. You only need to do it once. It is limited by income. It's roughly $500,000. When it comes to income, there's various interpretations, such as modified adjusted gross income. They do also monitor it on an annual basis. So if you don't qualify for 1 year, make sure you pay attention for the next year. There's different types of star exemptions, all right? There's the senior, there's the enhanced, which is also income-based. If you are a firefighter or sometimes other volunteers, you can qualify. And there's also a veteran exemption. If you are a veteran, thank you for your service. For all of these other types of star exemptions, I would suggest going down to the town and filing in person. Make sure you get a printed receipt. I would call them in advance to find out their hours. Due to COVID, it may be different than what's posted online. I would also ask them for what type of documentation you need to bring with you as proof. That way you get everything that you're entitled to. Next, I would suggest filing for your tax grievance immediately. So what happens for a tax grievance is if you own your home, you have to demonstrate through a grievance process that you are of the opinion that is obviously self-serving, that there are other comparable sales in your neighborhood for lower assessments and that you should be entitled to a lower assessment. If you purchase a home, the best proof of what your home is worth and what it should be assessed at is actually what you just paid for the home. And if your house is assessed for more than that, you're pretty much a lock to have your home taxes lowered due to that lower assessment. I would suggest looking up the deadlines for your particular municipality as soon as possible. The villages and 2 cities, Glen Cove and Long Beach, have different timeframes as well. You can also hire a company to do so. This is the name of the company that we refer, all right? We've heard great things about them. One of the other reasons why we refer them is everyone, if it's your primary residence, is entitled to a star exemption. Some unscrupulous companies charge you a percentage, only if they are successful, of the base tax less whatever the final tax is after the star exemption and then after the tax grievance process. But why should you have to pay a percentage of whatever the star exempt tax is because you did that yourself? The company that we refer charges you a percentage of whatever the base net tax is after the star exemption, less whatever the grievance process has awarded you. That way you only are charged a percentage of whatever their true savings is to you. So what we've heard from clients is that they may charge, let's say, a higher percentage, 40%, than other companies who may charge you 30%. But by the time you add on the other companies' 30% of taxes that you've already saved yourself through the star exemption, that ends up being more, which to us, we don't like because it's misinformation for the new homeowner. Or if you're so inclined, you can do so yourself. However, just like taxes and hiring an accountant, they usually pay for themselves, and there's a certain element of liability in case there's any issues in the future, God forbid. You should be able to look up your assessments online to see what the house is assessed at. Assessed value is a little bit different than fair market value, but you can use fair market value to contest assessed value. You have to do this on an annual basis. School taxes are capped at 5% increases per year unless there's other budgetary approvals. That's why you have to vote on your school budgets. If you don't grieve your taxes, generally speaking, they will go up 4 or 5% per year. If you do grieve your taxes, they will generally go up 1 or 2% per year. In all honesty, the 1 and 2% is offset by the 4 and 5%. So if you're not participating in grieving your taxes on an annual basis, you must do so immediately. If you don't, you're going to be paying for everyone else who does. If you're a real estate agent and you're listening to this, then you need to have your clients, your homeowners, file for the grievance for their taxes because it cannot hurt. Also, if the new homeowner is purchasing the home after the deadline, the companies will have the new purchaser cover any savings due to the previous filing from the seller. And it's a great tool to put in your listing that the grievance was already filed and the buyers could just simply take over. The buyers may not be thrilled with having to pay a company that they didn't hire. However, paying a percentage of some savings is better than getting no savings at all. Moving on, if you're a purchaser, you need to forward your mail. You can do so online. It costs $1 because they want to make sure that they can track down whoever asked for the mail to be forwarded, right? Otherwise, you could just forward your enemy's mail to wherever you wanted to. It also lasts for 1 year, so make sure you monitor your incoming mail. It'll have the forwarding sticker. It's a yellow sticker to remind you to do so. Next, you have to forward your Amazon. Otherwise, all of your subscribe and saves are going to go to your old residence. You also have to change your credit cards. And most importantly, if you change your zip code, try to memorize it. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get gas. You also need to change your driver's licenses. They say you have to do so within 10 days. No one ever really does. You can do so online as well, unless you have some other type of enhanced driver's license, which I believe they're going to be requiring, especially for international travel. And if you're renewing soon, generally they need you to get an eye test beforehand. So just do some research before you make the trip to the DMV. Sometimes potentially you can do so online. If you are a resident currently of New York City, you should notify your HR department if that is no longer the case. So that way they could potentially change your residency. Next, there's something known as a closing disclosure. If there's a bank involved, that is what your accountant is going to need to see in order to calculate your basis in the property. Again, if you don't have an accountant, you can handle it yourself. But as I said before, they generally pay for themselves. Not every closing cost is a same-year tax deduction. Some of them are increases to your basis to offset any potential future capital gains when you sell the property. So again, you're going to want to keep track of that. We always suggest, no matter how nice the sellers were, change the keys. You never know who has them. All right. If you're going to change everything to be an electronic version, I would suggest keeping one old school, old-fashioned actual physical key on your property, because if the battery dies in your electronic device and it's not hardwired, they generally require 9-volt batteries, which nobody keeps out on their person, on a daily basis. Next thing, the final thing for the purchaser is sometimes you're due back an estimated tax. If you closed in the months of August, September, and potentially October in Nassau County, your bank, if you have an escrowed loan, would want you to prepay any taxes that were due within 60 days. If you close in September, the October bill's not even out yet. So the title company would generally request 20% above last year's total in order to make sure that if there's any increase, potentially due to any exemptions, that they have the money to pay that. Because if you close in September, your first payment would be November 1st, which we explained in a previous continuing education class as to why that is under closing costs. And again, we reiterated it in our continuing education about loan documents. So you may be due back a refund from the title company. Same thing is true in Suffolk, just different months. If you close through October through December, the taxes for Suffolk County they usually come out December 1st. Sometimes it's a little delayed, and there's also a grace period. However, if you close in October, you wouldn't have the 12-1 tax, and it's the same premise that there would be an estimated tax. All right, so that concludes our buyers. When we talk about sellers, sort of the same thing, a little bit different though. The utilities you're going to want to turn off the day after you close if you're giving the keys. If you're not giving the keys, the day after you give possession. The reason it's the day after, not the day of, again, the purchasers are putting utilities in their name the day of, is if you tell the utilities that they should take off take them out of your name as of the date of possession, they may think it's 9 a.m. If you conduct your second walkthrough inspection at 10 a.m. and the utilities are off, the buyers are not going to be happy. So you don't know when the utility companies are going to turn them off. If you give them the same day as possession, it could be at any time. So always do so for the day after. We realize that you may not want to pay for the extra day, but it's an empty house and it's not going to cost you all too much compared to any inconvenience of holding the extra money in escrow, because the buyers are not going to allow the seller's attorney to release it until they've had a chance to actually see that the utilities are in working order. You also need to cancel your auto pay for utilities. If you had paperless and you cancel that account, they may not know where to send the bill, so you have to provide them with your forwarding address. If you have any landscapers, pool service, other deliveries, make sure that that's all canceled as well, and you put them on notice that you sold the property. You don't want your landscaper showing up next week when the new buyers may not want to utilize their services. For your mortgage, make sure that that auto pay is canceled the day you close, all right? You also due back money, usually, of any interest that the seller's attorney, because when you close, let's say on a Monday, the title closer will then overnight that, presumably the same day, depending on the time of day that you close. If it's later in the day, it won't be that day. Let's say it goes out on Tuesday, it'll be received by the payoff bank on Wednesday, and then it'll take a day for the bank to process it. That's Thursday. So the seller's attorney would traditionally take an extra week of interest. You would due that money back as well. There's also money in your escrow account, which, provided you have an escrow loan, that you do back as well, traditionally thousands of dollars, unless there was going to be a deficiency in your account. The bank that you're paying off is also going to send you a paid in full letter. The title closer at the closing will ask for your forwarding address for that purpose. And usually these documents will be received within 30 days. They say that that's the law, though due to COVID and the US Postal Service, they'll use those as excuses. Just make sure you get back the paid in full letter, the interest, and the escrow surplus that you would due back. Sometimes the bank will include one check for the taxes and the interest, but they should give you an accounting. If you have any questions, you can contact them. I'm sure your attorney can help you as well. If you have any tax grievances, you need to notify at closing. The transfer forms then notify the tax grievance company after the fact that there's a new purchaser, so that way they can pay that future bill. You need to also forward your mail. Here's the website, again, the same year. Again, forward your Amazon, credit card, same thing with gas, same thing with changing your driver's licenses. If you're moving out of state, sometimes they have reciprocity where you don't have to take the new state's exam. HR, again, notifying, closing disclosure. It's a little bit different for the seller because you want to take into consideration you have to pay capital gains. As we discussed in other continuing education classes, generally speaking, if you stayed in the property for 2 out of the last 5 years as your primary residence and didn't sell any other primary residences, plus you didn't use the home for business purposes, and you didn't participate in a 1031 exchange, there's generally speaking a $250,000 exemption per owner of the home. All right. If you don't have a CPA, we could always refer you to one that we like to think is real estate friendly and understands all of this, though it's generally pretty relatively understood. If there is to be any capital gains, there are other things to take into consideration when you receive that 1099. And that's if you have any closing costs, which is why they need the closing disclosure. All right. Because some of the fees, not all of them, are also write-offs. You also need to send the closing disclosure to your homeowner's insurance. They also owe you a refund. Don't cancel your homeowner's insurance until you've actually given the keys over to your purchaser. just because you cancel your policy and you send them the closing disclosure to evidence that you sold the property doesn't necessarily guarantee that they're going to ask you for your forwarding address. It sounds like it's common sense, but we've heard from clients that they just don't receive the check. And when they call their homeowners insurance company, say, why didn't you send the check? The answer is because you didn't provide us with the address, to which the seller says, well, you never asked and we didn't know to tell you. So now, we always tell clients you have to be proactive and tell the homeowners insurance that you have moved and provide the forwarding address. So that concludes our post-closing preparations, continuing education course. I hope you found this to be educational and follow the instructions on how to get your certificate, and we'll keep these courses coming. Enjoy the rest of your day, guys. Take care.